So now we've got to talk about Letitia James. In the last video, we were talking about President Trump and his win against Fani Willis. Now it's looking like the Department of Justice and President Trump are going to take an L when it comes to Letitia James and James Comey, for now, at least. So we just heard news and a recent update that Letitia James and James Comey are somewhat off the hook because they found that this case against them, the indictments against them, needed to be dismissed because Lindsay Halligan was unfairly or unjustly appointed. So now we're going to get into the details behind that, what that means for Letitia James and James Comey moving forward. And we're actually going to hear from James Comey a little bit later. Check this out from CBS News.
Now we jump to our other big story. The Trump administration now vowing to appeal after a federal judge threw out the criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. In twin rulings, the judge found prosecutor Lindsay Halligan was unlawfully appointed, writing, quote, "All actions flowing from Ms. Halligan's defective appointment constitute unlawful exercise of executive power and must be set aside." Now, the dismissals are a significant win for Comey and James, who both argued their cases were vindictive prosecutions of President Trump's political rivals. In a statement, an attorney for James said, quote, "This case was not about justice or the law. It was about targeting Attorney General James." Meanwhile, Comey celebrated the ruling in this video.
"I'm grateful that the court ended the case against me, which was a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence. I know that Donald Trump will probably come after me again, and my attitude's going to be the same. I'm innocent. I am not afraid."
CBS News correspondent.
Here's the thing about that. The dismissal isn't because either one of them's innocent. Let's make that very clear. Nice try, James. We're smarter than that. We know what this dismissal means. This dismissal was because of Lindsay Halligan and because it was seemingly rushed and not done the right way, not because you didn't actually lie in front of Senate. So we need to make that clear before we move on. It's a nice win for James right now, but we'll see. We'll see what happens moving forward and if he's still off the hook.
Natalie Brand joins us from the White House with more on this. Good morning, Natalie. This is not the ruling the administration wants, so what type of reaction are we seeing there?
Yeah, good morning, Errol. The administration is standing by Lindsay Halligan, arguing that she was legally appointed, they say, and also indicating they will pursue all and any legal actions to challenge the decision yesterday. Recall that Halligan was appointed, took over as the interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia in late September. And shortly after that, she secured these indictments for Comey and James. The judge in the decision yesterday noting that she was the only one to present the case to the grand jury and sign these indictments. Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi also had appointed her as a special attorney so she could participate in legal proceedings in court. AG Bondi, reacting to this news yesterday, spoke to reporters about next steps. And White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, also speaking to reporters, was asked about the president's reaction. Take a listen.
His reaction was, we've seen this before. We've seen partisan judges take unprecedented steps to try to intervene in accountability before, but we're not going to give up.
We'll be taking all available legal action, including an immediate appeal, to hold Letitia James and James Comey accountable for their unlawful conduct. Lindsay Halligan is an excellent U.S. attorney, and shame on them for not wanting her in office.
Dang, they have to try again.
Bondi said she's going to keep going when asked about this case. And Caroline Leavitt noted that President Trump wants to see accountability, Errol.
All right, Natalie Brand, thank you very much.
Good luck with that.
CBS News legal contributor Rebecca Royfee is here with me in studio to give a bit of analysis on what we've just witnessed. Rebecca, this is a stunning rebuke. Good morning, welcome. On what grounds can the White House appeal this ruling? The judge seemed clear.
He did, but this is a legal ruling, so an appellate court could revisit the conclusion he had about the appropriateness of the appointment of Lindsay Halligan.
And the judge pointed to a specific window in which the administration could fill a vacant appointment and said this was outside of that. The Attorney General wasn't valid in appointing Halligan. So how? So again, to those of y'all in the comments who are saying, oh, Comey didn't do anything wrong, he's innocent. That's not what this judge said in the dismissal.
The judge didn't say, hey, there's nothing there. These claims are baseless. The judge didn't say, oh, Letitia James, you didn't do anything wrong. We know you didn't lie to the mortgage company. We know you didn't lie to the insurance company. No, you're okay. You're safe. No, they said Lindsay Halligan shouldn't have been the one to indict this. And that's the issue. Not the actual indictments themselves. It's the person who brought the indictment and signed it.
Could these charges be brought back for both James and Comey?
Yeah, so first of all, it sounds as if this is sort of dismissing the indictment on a technicality, but it really is not a technicality because all those laws and the constitutional requirement are really about ensuring that there's a qualified U.S. attorney in place who is not only competent, but also adheres to the ethics of prosecutors to make sure that those prosecutions are fair. So, and as to your point, they did dismiss the indictment, but they did it without prejudice, which means that the prosecutor can bring another case. But of course, there's a complication here, which is that every criminal case has a statute of limitations, and James Comey's has run at this point. So it may be difficult for them to bring these charges again.
So this is not a ruling on the face of the charges. It's more the prosecutor who brought the charges.
Exactly.
The defense from both Comey and James was that this was a vindictive prosecution. So does that become a moot point at this stage, or might that be revived if the charges...
We don't want to hear that.
Absolutely, that could be revived if the charges come back, if the appeal is successful, or if for some reason they find a way to toll that statute of limitations. But again, that charge is somewhat similar to this one because essentially what it's saying is that this is a prosecution brought by somebody who's a political appointee rather than somebody who's qualified, who is committed to the notion of impartial justice. And so if she is not qualified, then there could be, or if she's requalified or the indictment comes back, there could be a new argument that the purpose of the indictment, the motive of the indictment was vindictive, that they singled out certain people because of their political beliefs.
And it sounds very familiar with what we just covered with Nathan Wade and Fani Willis. Nathan Wade, appointed as a special prosecutor in the election interference case, had no experience whatsoever, was in a relationship with Fani Willis, and we could all clearly see why Nathan Wade was there. Same thing they're saying with Lindsay Halligan. She shouldn't have been appointed, didn't have experience in this role. She was only brought there so she could bring these indictments before a grand jury and get them done before the statute of limitations ran out, especially and specifically on James Comey's indictment. So now James Comey might be off the hook, but it's interesting to see how those two can relate and that President Trump was involved in both of those cases.
And those are some of the specifics, but what about the big picture here, the political kind of overview? Just in our last few seconds, has this damaged the administration's credibility in bringing forward charges like this?
Well, I do think it has in certain respects. I mean, at least with regard to the different offices that we're looking to see whether or not these U.S. attorneys are qualified, because qualifications are not just about competence. They're about the very fundamental principle of the rule of law, which is that all people are treated equally, and we don't single out certain people because we dislike those people or we disagree with their political beliefs.
All right, Rebecca Royfee, great to have you here on this, and we'll discuss.
And shout out to Rebecca. We're also going to hear one more thing about Letitia James in this instance from MS Now. Check this out.
Federal case against former FBI Director James Comey has just been dismissed after a judge determined the interim U.S. attorney who brought the case, Lindsay Halligan, was unlawfully appointed. I want to bring in MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin, legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher, and Peter Baker stays with me. Guys, I was just handed the 29 pages of this. I don't know if either of you is a speed reader, but give us the high points or low points, depending on your perspective here.
There are two, and I should also break, Chris, on our air that this order, it looks as if Judge Cameron Curry has also entered a similar order with respect to Letitia James, who is also being prosecuted by the same office and by Lindsay Halligan in particular.
There you go.
My two high points here are as follows. One, this is a dismissal without prejudice, which means that the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia has an important choice before it. There is a federal statute that allows a case that has been time barred but is dismissed for other reasons to be brought again within a 6-month period of time. Theoretically, that gives the U.S. Attorney's Office then 6 months to bring the case against Jim Comey again. But that also means if they do that, they don't get a chance to appeal the ruling with respect to the lawfulness of Lindsay Halligan's appointment.
It's a tough decision.
You're asking, well, why would that be so important to them? It's important to them because they have at least 4 other people around the country who are similarly situated, who are appointed by the Attorney General in an interim capacity after that first 120 days under the statute has elapsed. And so it's very important to this president and this attorney general that its interim U.S. attorneys be able to continue as such. So that's point one. Okay. Point two would be that at the end of the opinion, Judge Curry says very clearly that they don't get to appoint another interim U.S. attorney, but rather that the power, as under the statute, remains with the district court to install an interim U.S. attorney unless and until the president nominates and the Senate confirms someone else. So it's not just that Lindsey Halligan herself can't remain in this position. It's that Attorney General Pam Bondi and the president cannot do this again. They're not entitled to use this same procedure or process, but rather the district judges of the Eastern District of Virginia, under the statute in place, are entitled to nominate and choose somebody of their own selection now going forward. And again, the U.S. Attorney's Office, whoever it's going to be led by in the future, it's not going to be Lindsey Halligan, it looks like, will have to make a choice in the Comey case whether to appeal or whether to try and file these charges again and still deal with some of the same motions to dismiss that Jim Comey has also brought, the one for vindictive and selective prosecution, for example, or stemming from what he calls the fundamental ambiguity of the charges against him. If they were to bring the case again, you have to imagine that Jim Comey and his legal team, led by Pat Fitzgerald, would bring those same motions yet again. And those are really fatal, in particular because they could lead to a dismissal with prejudice as opposed to here, where you've got a dismissal by Judge Curry without.
Because already, I mean, besides stating on the very first page that this was invalid, that the attempt to install Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid, they go back to the factual background, the appointment, and they do not obviously address these other charges or that he was the other defense that he was putting forward, including what he called a fundamental ambiguity, as Lisa points out. So let's remind folks, what were and I guess could again be the charges against James?
Yeah, and I want to talk about Letitia James here too. So let's
Comey. Right. So James Comey has been charged with two counts. One is obstruction of Congress, of a congressional proceeding, and one is lying to Congress. And all of this stems from a hearing in 2020 and where he was testifying about something that he had initially testified about in 2017. And so this indictment came down just days before that statute of limitations was going to end. And so they had to get Halligan in there very quickly and secure this indictment very quickly. I believe she was 3 or 4 days on the job when she actually did this. And as we know, and as we've discussed extensively, she went into that grand jury room by herself and presented this indictment. And as we learned last week when I was in court, Comey's team came out with a motion to dismiss late Friday night, saying that they believe that there was not even a valid indictment in place. So we didn't even get to those motions to dismiss based on the alleged grand jury misconduct that happened. You'll remember that she got 2 of those charges. There was initially a 3rd charge in there. The grand jury agreed on those 2 charges. And then she went and basically redrafted a new version with those 2 charges that the grand jury did agree to without ever presenting that to the full jury, and just had the foreperson and another grand juror sign off on that. So there's still ample space for motions to dismiss to arise. But I just want to add, this is not a full victory for the Comey team or the James team, because in every single one of these motions to dismiss that they filed, they have asked for these cases to be dismissed with prejudice, meaning that they cannot bring these cases again. But this one right here, both of these have been dismissed without prejudice.
Yep. So it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward. If from what we've seen from the Department of Justice, from what we've heard from Pam Bondi, this isn't the end at all. So we're going to be hearing about James Comey and Letitia James more. Let me know what y'all think about this in the comments in the chat.